بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Today in lesson 12 we shall discuss the concept of sidq and kidb. The literal translation to sidq is truthfulness, and the opposite is kidb, which means lying. This is the linguistic meaning, the dictionary meaning, the literal meaning. There's another word that we also find in the Quran and Hadith, or rather in the Hadith, and that is the word tawriya. The word tawriya means a word which has multiple meanings, and the speaker, he intends one meaning, whereas the listener understands another meaning. So multiple meanings, and the speaker intends one meaning and the listener understands another meaning. Now, what is the correct definition of the word sidq in terms of the Quran and Hadith? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, in the second juz, a verse wherein He explains the attributes and characteristics of that person who is a sadiq. So the word sidq means truthfulness, and the word sadiq is the one who is true. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والكتاب والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions several important points, and these points can then be summarized into 5 main points or qualities which I have written here. Point number 1 is beliefs. Point number 2 is worship. Point number 3 is etiquette, social etiquettes. Point number 4 is transactions, and point number 5, akhlaq. So those who have these 5 characteristics, these 5 qualities, these 5 points in their lives, they are the sadiqeen. أولئك هم الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. They are the sadiqeen, they are the muttaqeen. That means their beliefs are intact with the beliefs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Their worships are in line with the worships of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Their social etiquettes, how to deal with one another, how to deal with others, are in line with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's etiquettes, which is known as mu'asharat. Their transactions, their dealings, are in line with the dealings and transactions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is known as mu'amalat. And number 5, their akhlaq. Akhlaq refers to their praiseworthy traits that are related to the heart. They're also in line with the traits of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Those who have these 5 qualities are known as the sadiqeen, those who are truthful. So the dictionary meaning is truthfulness, and many a times we believe and we understand this word to only apply to someone who is true in his speech. Whereas in the terminology of the Quran and Hadith, this word does not only apply to someone who has or someone who's true in his speech. This applies to that person who has these 5 qualities. That means he's true in his iman. He's true in his beliefs, he's true in his worships, he's true in his muasharat, his social etiquette. He's true in his muamalat, his transactions and dealings, and he's true in his akhlaq to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Maryam, وَذْكُرَ فِي الْكِتَابِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ إِنَّهُ كَانَ صِدِّيقًا نَبِيًّا. And remember Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam in the scripture, he is a siddiq. I mean, he is true in his iman. And he's also truthful in his speech. So the word siddiq doesn't only mean that a person is truthful in his speech. It means that he's true in his iman, and truthfulness in speech comes under this broad meaning. So to constrict the meaning of sidq, sadiq, siddiq to only being truthful in one's speech is incorrect. Rather, this is only a part of the meaning. So Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasallam was true in his iman. That means he was true to Allah. Whatever test he was put through, with full conviction and truthfulness and honesty, he fulfilled those tasks and he was successful in this great trial and tribulation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put him through. So this word, Siddiq or Sadiq, it can refer to both males and females. Just a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, our respected Mufti Sahib, he gave a talk on this, and about the word Siddiq, highlighting how it's applied. So the word Siddiq can be applied to both male and female. وَأُمُّهُ صِدِّيقًا. In respect to Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam, who was the mother of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, in the Quran she is referred to as Siddiqa, a female Siddiq, one who is true in her iman. So again, she was also truthful in her speech, but the word Siddiqa has a much more of a broader meaning. She was true in her worship, her beliefs, in her devotion, in her commitment, in her connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a station, and this station, although many Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam were granted this station by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they are referred to as Siddiq. And after prophethood, this is the highest station that a person can acquire. And among the entire Muslim Ummah, the person who was at the top of the station was none other than Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. When the entire nation went against Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and they falsified him, it was Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu anhu who confirmed his message and who considered him to be true. There is an incident that was reported when the Prophet ﷺ traveled from Makkah Mukarramah to Bayt al-Maqdis and to the seven heavens and beyond, and he returned in less than a few seconds in the portion of a night. After this incident happened, Rasulullah ﷺ, he related this incident in front of people like Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl was his staunch enemy. So Abu Jahl said that this happened in less than a split of a second. Rasulullah ﷺ said, yes. He traveled from Makkah Mukarramah to Bayt al-Maqdis, to the seven heavens and beyond, back to Bayt al-Maqdis, and from there to Makkah Mukarramah, and again he returned to his home. We find a description of this event in the books of Hadith, wherein when the Prophet ﷺ left, he closed the door, and as the door was closing, it had not yet fully closed and he had already returned. This was a miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expanded the time for him. So Abu Jahl said, let me call the people and then you can relate this incident in front of the entire tribesmen, in front of all the people of Makkah Mukarramah. So his objective and purpose was to, na'udhu billah, try to disgrace Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because he knew that people would not believe him. And when he was asked questions about the incident, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave exact and precise answers in respect to Masjid al-Aqsa. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the medium of Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, he brought that image before him. And although the questions were ridiculous, but the answers which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was giving were accurate and precise. Nonetheless, when Abu Jahl and the enemies of Islam related this incident in front of Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, they asked him, is this even possible? So he said no. Then Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu said, but who is saying this? So they said, your companion, your friend, Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. At that moment in time, Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu said, if he is saying it, then it's true. And ever since, he was granted the title As-Siddiq. As-Siddiq. The Prophet ﷺ is also known as Sadiq and Amin. Again, he wasn't as Sadiq and Amin. The Prophet ﷺ would never ever lie. He never ever lied, even in his jokes. His jokes, although they consisted of humor, but there was never ever an element of deception, lie, or something which was against reality. Once, an old lady came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and she requested that he make a special prayer for her, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant her entry into Jannah and paradise. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that old women will not be granted entry into paradise. She started to cry and weep. Then he explained that when a person passes away, he is granted his prime age in Jannah, which is approximately 33 years old. So even if an old lady was to pass away, an old, devout, pious, righteous lady was to pass away in the state of Iman and Islam, she will not be an old lady in Jannah. Rather, she will be given her youth again. So look, although this was a light humor, it was not a lie. So this is how the jokes and light humor of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to be. That he would also engage in joke and in lighthearted talk, but never ever would he lie. Now we should analyze our speech. Many of us, in order to please others, entertain others, we also crack jokes. But many of the time, our jokes consist of lies. They have no basis whatsoever. And if we were to review and examine what we said, we would come to this conclusion that it was a lie and it had no basis or foundation whatsoever. This is against the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he was Sadiq, and he was a Sadiq and al-Amin, truthful, and he would fulfill his trust. We find in another hadith reported by Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Inna sidqa yahdi ila al-birr wa inna al-birr yahdi ila al-jannah." That indeed, truthfulness, this means truthfulness in all of these 5 areas, not only truthfulness in speech. So truthfulness in all of these 5 areas, beliefs, worships, etiquettes, transactions, and akhlaq, this leads to piety and righteousness. And piety and righteousness then leads to Jannah. So the question that arises here is that, let's assume if a person, he's only truthful in his speech, and he's doing all these other branches, or in all these other areas he lacks, or he is going against the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So there's no doubt that his truthfulness in speech will be a means of reward, but to go against Rasulullah's teachings in all the other areas, and then how can this action lead to piety, and how can this small restricted form of piety lead to Jannah? So the answer has already been given, and that is the word sidq here is referring to truthfulness and being true in all of these branches. So in short, we say one who is true to Allah, or one who is true to his iman. This will lead to piety, righteousness, full and complete devoutness, and then this will lead to Jannah. وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَسْتَقُ حَتَّى يُكْتَبَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ صِدِّيقًا. And a person who continues to speak the truth, so sidq bil lisan was sidq bil arkan. A person who continues to speak the truth, and a person who continues to carry out truthful actions. This person will be written as a siddiq in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously the levels of this station, siddiqiyat, they differ, they vary. And on the contrary, وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَكْذِبُ وَإِنَّ الْكَذِبَ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْفُجُورِ وَإِنَّ الْفُجُورِ يَهْدِي إِلَى النَّارِ. On the contrary, there's a person who lies. He lies with his tongue, he lies with his actions. This act of lying, either whether it's done with the tongue or through the actions, this will lead to disobedience, and disobedience then leads to the fire of Jahannam. وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَكْذِبُ حَتَّى يُكْتَبَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَذَّابًا. And a person who continues to either lie with his tongue or his actions, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is written as a kadhab, an extreme liar. So Siddiq, one who is extremely true in his commitment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by fulfilling all of the demands that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has requested from him. And the opposite is kadhab, one who is an extreme liar. And the munafiqeen, although they are hypocrites, they are also kadhab and kadhib, liars, because on the outset they are displaying Islam, but inwardly they're lying, they're deceiving. Next, if a person finds himself in this situation, what is the treatment? First and foremost, a person should ponder and contemplate over the virtues of speaking the truth and being true to his commitment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he should also contemplate over the warnings which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran and Hadith in respect to a person who either lies with his speech or through his actions. So contemplation, number one. Number two, a person should try to make sure that his speech is concise and spoken out of necessity, so short and sweet. Number three, all of the demands of sidq, which are correct beliefs, correct worship, correct etiquettes, correct transactions, correct akhlaq, a person should try to fulfill all these demands according to the Sharia. And number 4, which is the permanent solution, that is tazkiyah. Without tazkiyah, a person will falter. Let's assume a person for 20 years has been truthful in his speech, he's been truthful in his commitment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's been truthful in his beliefs, worship, ethics, transactions, akhlaq. Sorry, apart from akhlaq, the first 4. But the heart has not been purified, or it is purified but not fully purified. Let's assume either the heart is 20% purified, 30% purified, 40% purified, and yet he is true in his speech and all of these other 4 branches. A very big question arises, and that is, here it's being said that without tazkiyah, this quality cannot be found in a person's life fully, yet we see a person who's engaged in truthfulness, and he's been doing it for the past 20, 30, 40 years. The answer is very simple. This individual has been engaged in truthfulness due to his circumstances. Once those circumstances change, then the inner qualities also change. If there is tazkiyah, then whether a person's circumstances change or they don't change, at all times he will remain true. Many a times people, they are only true to their commitments to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when people are around, in a masjid, when people are looking, or when they are in the public eye. What's happening at home, what's happening in privacy, what's happening on the internet, what's happening behind the closed doors, no one can see. This is in respect to just general day-to-day activities. When it comes to transactions, when a person feels that he is on the wrong, he tries to twist the transaction, he tries to twist his words so that he doesn't experience monetary failure, financial loss. And again, if there's no one there to supervise him, if there's no one there to watch him, then he feels that he is free to do what he wants, how he wants. So again, this person in the eye of the public is a truthful man, but in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is not a truthful man. So without tazkiyah, this full realization that Allah is watching me cannot be acquired. If the heart is fully cleansed, if the heart is fully purified, only then will a person, even if that transaction is going against him, even if his words are going against him, even if he's on the wrong, he will accept his mistake and he will acknowledge his mistake and he will try to make amends. So akhlaq, tazkiyah are extremely important. Because this is something which will permanently bring these beautiful characteristics and qualities into a person's life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to understand and practice. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Sadaqallahu al-azim.